Being outside is good for us. It's that simple. And trails make it easy for us to walk, bike, and be active outside in our own backyards. On the trail, we see people moving, connecting with their communities, making the places where they live great. For 40 years, Rails to Trails Conservancy has led the way, creating trails across the country, making it safer and easier for everyone to get outside. They want you to get involved. Find your trail and start your journey today at railstotrails.org/iHeart and follow at Rails to Trails on social.
Hey listeners, this is Peter. And welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. In 1795, the government of revolutionary France made an unusual announcement. It offered a prize of 12,000 francs, a small fortune at the time, to anyone who could solve a problem that was killing more French soldiers than enemy fire. The problem was dinner. France was at war with most of Europe, and its armies were starving in the field, not for lack of food, but for lack of food that survived the journey. Bread molded, meat rotted, and vegetables spoiled. Soldiers on campaign lived on salted meat and hardtack, and they died in droves of scurvy and malnutrition, enemies that no musket could answer. The saying attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte that an army marches on its stomach captured a truth every general of the era understood. Whoever could make food last would change warfare itself. The man who solved it was not a scientist. He was not an engineer. He was a Parisian candy maker. Our history brief today returns to History is Weird and why knights fought snails in medieval manuscripts. A quick word from our sponsors.
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This day in history. On July 25, 306, Constantine the Great was proclaimed Roman Emperor by his troops in York, England. His reign would fundamentally transform the Roman Empire, including the legalization of Christianity. On July 25, 1956, the Italian ocean liner SS Andrea Doria collided with the Swedish liner Stockholm off the coast of Massachusetts. The Andrea Doria sank the following day in one of the most famous maritime disasters of the 20th century. Nicolas Appert was a confectioner and chef with a shop in Paris, a man who had spent his life around kitchens, breweries, and the practical chemistry of cooking, and who possessed the one quality the problem actually required, and that was patience. Appert began experimenting in the mid-1790s, and his method, arrived at through years of pure trial and error, was elegantly simple. Place food inside a thick glass bottle. Seal it with a cork, wired down tight like champagne. Then submerge the sealed bottle in boiling water for hours, depending on the contents, of course. Meats, vegetables, soups, stews, and milk. Appert bottled them all and found that food treated this way remained edible not for days or weeks, but even for months and years. He did not know why this was happening. This is worth pausing on here because it is one of the most remarkable facts in the history of food. Appert had no theory of bacteria. No one did at the time. Louis Pasteur's germ theory, the science that explains why sealed, heated food does not spoil, well, that was still half a century away. Appert had invented sterilization 50 years before science could explain what he had done. He simply knew that the process worked. In 1810, after roughly 14 years of experimentation and a successful trial of his products by the French Navy, Appert was awarded the 12,000 franc prize by Napoleon's government. There was one condition, though. He could not patent the method. He had to publish it, openly, completely, for everyone. Appert agreed, and his book, The Art of Preserving Animal and Vegetable Substances, became the founding document of food preservation. The process was named after him, appertization. It would not keep his name for long. Within months of Appert's book appearing in Paris, a man named Peter Durand walked into a patent office in London, the capital of the empire France was at war with, and he patented a strikingly similar preservation concept, with one modification. Instead of breakable glass, Durand's patent covered vessels of tin coated iron, basically the tin can. Durand appears to have been acting, at least in part, as an agent for the idea rather than its originator. Some historians trace the underlying concept to a French inventor named Philippe de Gerard, who used Durand to register it in England. But either way, the commercial consequences of all this moved really fast. Durand sold the patent to two English businessmen, Brian Donkin and John Hull, who built the world's first commercial canning factory in London. By 1813, they had their first major customer, the Royal Navy. France's government had funded the invention of preserved food to feed the armies of Napoleon. And within 3 years, it was British factories producing canned rations to feed the Navy that was blockading France. The weapon France commissioned was captured, industrialized, and then turned against it almost immediately. Napoleon, for the record, never got meaningful use out of the invention that his government had paid for. By the time canning matured into an industry, he was on St. Helena, where, in one final irony, the British garrison guarding him was supplied with canned food. The early tin can was a formidable object. It was made of wrought iron, heavy as a small anvil, and sealed by being soldered. A skilled tinsmith could produce only a handful per day, and it had one design flaw so magnificent that it deserves its own place in history of human oversight. Nobody at the time invented the can opener. Not for 4.5 decades, actually. The can was patented in 1810. The first practical can openers did not appear until 1850s. For nearly half a century, the instructions printed on canned rations told soldiers and sailors to open their dinner with a hammer and a chisel. Troops in the field used bayonets, rocks, and occasionally, and not advisably, gunfire. The lead in the can had much darker consequences. Canned provisions accompanied the great Arctic expeditions of the era, and some historians have long pointed to lead exposure from the cans, among other sources, as a contributor to the catastrophic Franklin expedition of 1845, though the debate still continues. The technology was genuinely revolutionary. It was also, for its first half century, genuinely dangerous, absurdly heavy, and nearly impossible to open. Progress rarely arrives finished, but it does arrive. Canning spread through the 19th century on the engine that had created it, and that was war. The American Civil War put canned food into the hands of hundreds of thousands of Union soldiers and built the fortunes of companies whose names still sit on supermarket shelves. Borden's condensed milk chief among them. By the First World War, canned rations fed entire armies. By the Second, they fed entire nations, including, as we covered in a previous episode, a certain pink bloc from Minnesota that traveled everywhere the war went. If you want to look back, that's the episode on spam. And in peacetime, the can quietly transformed civilian life, decoupling diet from season and geography, making food storable, shippable, and survivable, laying one of the unglamorous foundations of the modern world. Every pantry on Earth contains the descendants of Appert's boiled bottles. And by the way, Nicolas Appert, the man who solved the problem, took the prize, and gave the method freely to the world, well, his factory was damaged in the wars. His attempts at businesses were repeatedly undone by the turbulence of the era and by his competitors, many using the very method that he had published for free. He kept working and experimenting into old age, respected by scientists, but never really wealthy. He died in 1841 at the age of 91 and was buried in a common grave. The History Brief. If you ever visit a museum with medieval manuscripts, you might expect to see illustrations of kings, castles, dragons, saints, and heroic battles. And you will, obviously. But every so often, you'll turn the page and find something that makes absolutely no sense. A fully armored knight locked in mortal combat with a giant snail. No dragon, no demon, no monster. Just a snail. This wasn't a one time joke. Historians have identified well over 100 medieval manuscript illustrations showing knights confronting enormous snails. Some raise swords, others carry shields or spears. In a few, the snail even appears to be winning. So, why? Well, the honest answer is nobody knows for sure. And that's what kind of makes this one of these little mysteries of history. Most of these illustrations appear in the margins of beautifully decorated manuscripts produced between the 1200s and the 1300s, particularly in France and England. These margins were often filled with what historians call playful, bizarre, and sometimes downright surreal artwork that had little to do with the main text. You'll find rabbits hunting humans, monkeys playing musical instruments, fish riding horses, even, and people with bird heads. So, in some ways, giant snails kind of fit right in. But because they appear so often, many scholars suspect they mean something. One popular theory is that the snail symbolizes cowardice. After all, snails retreat into their shells when threatened. A knight fighting one might represent someone confronting fear, or perhaps mocking an opponent who lacked courage. Another theory points to social satire. Some historians suggest the snail represented the growing wealth of peasants or some newly prosperous merchants. To medieval nobles, these social changes may have seemed like an unexpected challenge, small, slow, but impossible to ignore. Others think the images carried religious symbolism, perhaps representing sin, death, or even resurrection, since snails emerge after rain and then disappear for long periods. And then there's this other possibility maybe they were simply there to be funny. It's easy to imagine medieval people as solemn, deeply serious individuals who spent all day praying or fighting wars. But they also laughed. They probably told jokes. And they doodled. They enjoyed visual humor just like we do today. The artists who decorated manuscripts weren't necessarily illustrating theology every time they picked up a brush. Sometimes they may simply have been entertaining themselves or their readers. So, next time someone tells you that medieval life might have been dull, remember, somewhere in a monastery, an artist spent hours carefully painting an armored knight preparing for the greatest battle of his life against a snail. And no one, not even historians, can say exactly why. I know, history is weird. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of those links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. And I invite you guys to join our Patreon membership, where you have access to videos and interviews weeks before they air. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.